All right, let's dive into this. El Dorado, huh? You really went all out for this deep dive. Lesson plans, historical chronicles, I even see some poetry in here, wow. And a map. Very cool.
It's a great choice for a deep dive. A lot of people think they know El Dorado, but there's so much more to it than just, a city of gold.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping to uncover here. So, basic question first. I know it's kind of cliche, but where do we even start? Like, what was El Dorado? A city, a king, a myth?
Well, it actually started with a person. Before the conquistadors, before the Spanish arrived in South America, there were the Muisca people living in what is now Colombia.
Okay. Before the conquistadors. Got it. So tell me about these Muisca.
Well, imagine, picture this. High in the Andes Mountains, there's this lake, Lake Guatavita. And around this lake, the Muisca would have these huge coronation ceremonies whenever they had a new ruler.
A coronation ceremony. Okay. So are we talking big crowds, lots of rituals? Help me visualize this.
Oh, yeah. Big time. Like, imagine bonfires and incense everywhere. Smoke filling the air. Even coming from rafts out on the lake itself. And right at the center of it all is this guy, the new ruler. And get this, they would strip him completely naked and cover his entire body in gold dust.
Wow, that's intense. I guess that's where the whole El Dorado thing comes from, right? The gilded one.
Right. And he wasn't just standing around either. They'd put him on a raft, piled high with gold and emeralds. His chiefs, too, all decked out in gold, all on this raft together.
So it's like a floating treasure chest, basically.
Exactly. And then the wildest part. They'd row out to the middle of the lake and toss all that gold, all those emeralds, right into the water as an offering to their gods.
Whoa. That's kind of a beautiful image, right? Like they were giving back to nature. Not at all what I would think of when I picture conquistadors and gold,
Yeah, there's definitely a clash of worldviews going on there. Now, put yourself in the shoes of a Spanish conquistador, right? You show up in this new land, you've heard all these crazy stories about gold, about riches beyond your wildest dreams, and then you hear about some guy covered head to toe in gold tossing jewels into a lake. What would you think?
I probably think I'd hit the jackpot. I'd be looking for that city of gold too, probably.
Exactly. You can totally see how the Spanish would completely misinterpret something like that. They weren't trying to understand the Muisca culture. They just wanted to confirm their own fantasies about striking it rich.
So basically, a sacred ritual got turned into a treasure hunt.
So how did that happen? Did they just make stuff up?
Not necessarily make stuff up, but look, the early Spanish expeditions, they did find some gold in South America. Not nearly as much as they'd hoped, but enough to fuel the fire, Enough to keep them believing that El Dorado was out there somewhere.
I guess finding a little gold would just make you want more.
Mm-hmm.
Like an appetizer. Makes sense. Sadly. Right. And here's the thing. Nobody actually knew what El Dorado was or where it was supposed to be. It was this vague idea, this legend.
Oh, so like every time they hit a dead end, they could just tell themselves they were looking in the wrong place. It was never over.
Exactly. Like in that map you included in the research, the one by Jodocas Hondius from 1598, he actually put El Dorado on the map as a city, right on the shores of this big lake, Lake Parim.
Wow, a city on a lake. I can see how that image would capture people's imaginations. It's like something out of a fairy tale.
And that's the crazy part. Lake Parim didn't even exist. It was based on rumors and probably some explorers exaggerating what they saw or misinterpreting things.
So they were making maps based on, what, campfire stories, and basing their expeditions on this, like, warped version of a Muisca ceremony. It all seems so, I don't know, flimsy.
Flimsy, yeah, maybe. But even so, this whole El Dorado thing had a huge impact. It drove exploration deeper and deeper into the Americas, all in the name of finding this mythical city of gold.
It's kind of sad when you think about it. All that searching, all that effort, and for what? It led to so much destruction and suffering for the people who are already living there.
Yeah, it's definitely a dark side to the whole story. Think about it. The search for El Dorado basically gave the conquistadors an excuse to do whatever they wanted. Violence, slavery, you name it. All justified by this fantasy of finding a city of gold.
Like that expedition, what was it, Pizarro? The one where he went through the Amazon? That was brutal.
Yeah, Gonzalo Pizarro. In the 1540s, he and his men, they were driven by, greed, desperation, and they just inflicted horrible suffering on the indigenous people they met along the way. Awful stuff.
It's like they couldn't even see the people they were hurting. It was all about the kids.
Yeah.
Like they were blinded by it or something.
That's a good way to put it. They were so focused on this myth, this idea of El Dorado, that they lost sight of basic humanity. It's important to remember that these expeditions, they weren't just like stories in a history book. They had real consequences for real people.
Makes you wonder if any of the conquistadors ever stopped and thought, wait a minute, what are we even doing here? Is this even real?
Oh, I'm sure some of them did, especially after years of searching, finding nothing. But the allure of El Dorado was just so strong, that promise of riches, it was hard to let go of.
Yeah, I guess so. So this whole El Dorado thing, it wasn't just a 16th century fad, right? Like,
Yeah.
we've got a poem in here, Edgar Allan Poe, El Dorado. He wrote that in the mid-1800s. So clearly this idea stuck around.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? He wrote it in 1849, right when the California gold rush was happening. So many parallels, right? People risking everything, traveling thousands of miles, all for the chance to strike it rich.
Do you think he was like making a statement about that? About the gold rush?
Yeah. Possibly. I mean, in the poem, This Night, he spends his whole life searching for El Dorado, never gives up, even when he's old and tired. It could be a commentary on how we chase after things, you know? How we can get so caught up in the pursuit that we lose sight of everything else.
It's like he's saying it's all pointless in
Yeah.
a way. That even if you find what you're looking for, what then?
That's one way to read it, for sure. And that ending with the pilgrim shadow pointing the knight toward the valley of the shadow, it's pretty dark. Like, he only finds El Dorado in death.
Yeah, kind of a bleak message. But it also makes you think, like, what does El Dorado really represent? Is it just about gold? Or is it more about, I don't know, something deeper? Like a metaphor for happiness or fulfillment or something like that?
It could be all of those things. Maybe it's not so much about the destination, but the journey itself. The constant striving, the never-ending search.
That's a really interesting way to think about it. In our world today, we're always told to achieve more, to get more stuff.
Yeah.
It's like we're all chasing our own El Dorados in a way.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the big takeaways from this whole El Dorado myth. It forces you to ask yourself, what are you really searching for? And are you willing to pay the price? Yeah, I mean, are you really living your values or just, chasing some empty dream? It's
That's-
worth thinking about.
For sure. And especially when you see how much damage those El Dorado expeditions did, how many people got hurt in the process, it reminds you that this isn't just some abstract idea.
Yeah.
It's real history, real lives.
It is. And it makes you think, like, what would the Muisca think if they could see how their ritual got twisted, how it became this symbol of greed and conquest?
It's kind of like their whole story got stolen, doesn't it? Turned into something it wasn't.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. For them, gold wasn't about power or wealth. It was about something spiritual, something sacred. That whole ritual at Lake Guatavita, it wasn't about hoarding treasure. It was about giving back to nature, to their gods.
That's a pretty amazing concept when you think about it.
It is, and it's so different from how the conquistadors saw it. I mean, for them, gold was all about power, about dominance. I guess it just goes to show how important it is to, try to understand different cultures, different ways of seeing the world.
Absolutely. So you gave me all this research for this deep dive, so I got to ask,
Yeah.
what does El Dorado mean to you? Like, is it just a story about greed, a warning, or is it something else?
I think it's a lot of things, honestly. I mean, it shows how powerful our desires can be, right?
Yeah.
And how far we're willing to go to get what we want, even if it means hurting other people or, destroying things along the way.
It's like a reflection of ourselves almost. I mean, maybe we aren't all searching for a city of gold, but we all have our own El Dorados, don't we? Those things we're chasing after.
We do. And I think that's maybe the most important thing to remember, right? To always be aware of what we're really searching for and to make sure it's something that actually matters.
I like that. Be aware. That's a good takeaway. Well, on that note, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. Thanks for taking this deep dive with me.
Yeah, anytime. It was great.